Good evening. Welcome. My name is Jane Josem. I'm the Museum Director and CEO. I'd like to acknowledge the Boonwurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respect to their elders, past, present and emerging. Welcome to our temporary Jewish Holocaust Centre site, our home away from home while we rebuild this in Selwyn Street, Elsternwick. And welcome to everyone out there Zooming from their homes. It's great to be back doing live events, dipping our toes into the water of live events, and in this new landscape, doing hybrid in-person and Zooming as well. So it's a brave new world where we have all these options. And I think until we get the vaccines rolling out, we'll continue to do this, and let's see what the future holds. But it is very exciting to be back. We see our role here at the Jewish Holocaust Centre very much as preserving, documenting and sharing Holocaust survivor stories, and particularly those from Melbourne. So tonight, we're going to learn a bit more about another unique tale. And I'm not going to talk too much about it because we have two very capable people here to talk about it. First of all, Sue Hampel, who's the co-president with Pauline Rockman, Sue Hampel OAM, who's co-president of the Jewish Holocaust Centre. Best known, I think, for her incredible educational expertise across Holocaust and genocide studies, which covers over 30 years of teaching at Mount Scopus College and currently working at Monash University as an academic mentor to Indigenous students and a teaching associate in the arts faculty. In 2000, Sue Hampel brought the March of the Living program to Australia and has taken over 1,000 secondary school students to Poland and Israel. She's led and organised study tours in Poland and Rwanda. Sue represents Australia at the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, the IRA plenary meetings in Europe, and has been representing us since 2015. In 2019, Sue was appointed as a member of the National Archives of Australia Advisory Council. So who better to be hosting this conversation with Sue Smethurst, the author of Freedom Circus, which is pretty much the topic that we'll be looking at tonight. So Sue Smethurst is a senior journalist with the Australian Women's Weekly, and she spent 20 years in media working across television, radio and magazines. Currently a senior writer with the Australian Women's Weekly, she's written 8 books, including Behind Closed Doors, Spartacus and Me, Blood on the Rosary and A Diamond in the Dust. But we're here, of course, to talk about her most recent book, The Freedom Circus, which tells the story of her husband's grandparents and their journey from war-torn Poland to Australia. So I'm not going to say very much more. I'll leave it to the two Sues to carry on the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Thank you. I'd like to also extend my warm welcome to everybody here. Thank you for coming to our very, very first event in our temporary space. And hello to my 2 Monash students at the back, Lauren and Amelia. Lovely to see you both here and lovely to see everybody, of course. And the other thing that Jane may not have known about Sue is not only has she had 20 years experience in media working across TV and radio and magazine, but her career took her around the world. And I heard you interviewed the rich and famous, including the Crown Princess Mary of Denmark, yes, Kylie Minogue, Olivia Newton-John, and even Christopher Skates.
Yes, I found Skatesy when nobody else could. I found him in Mallorca. We had a lovely time. We're not saying that, are we? No, it was terrible, terrible.
So that's going to be, Jane, that could be another in conversation about that.
Oh, so exactly. We might have to switch the Zoom off for that one though, maybe, Jane, I think.
Yeah, and Sue also worked with the Current Affairs Sunrise, and she spent 5 years with my mother's favourite person, Ian Mitchell on 3AW. So she's also spent a lot of time. So she, like, that's just all about Sue, but she's here to talk about this book here, which we're going to talk about. So, so thank you for agreeing to be here.
Thank you for having me here. I'm so thrilled, and I'm so delighted to see real people, a real live audience. This is just wonderful. Thank you. I'm very deeply honoured, and it's lovely that you've all come out. I know it's budget night, and everybody would really rather be at home looking at the budget. So no. So thank you for coming out here this evening. I'm really touched.
And Sue's got her children and her husband over there in the front row. So hello, welcome to the Holocaust Centre as well to you. So the format of the evening is that Sue and I will chat for about 35, 40 minutes, and then we want to hand over to you to ask any questions that you want to ask, and you can tell Sue all the connections that you have with different people. Every time she meets people, they go, oh, you know, like there's always a connection.
Even this evening, I'm hearing stories about my grandparents-in-law already, so which is really quite lovely. So everywhere I go, someone says, oh, I met or I know such and such. So please do tell me, because I love them all, everyone.
Yeah, so thank you again. Okay, so let's get started. So I just wanted to ask, what inspired you, a non-Jewish award-winning author and journalist, to write a book about the Holocaust? How did the story begin?
So I guess this is my little part of the show and tell part for the evening. The story really began with this lovely little rusted tin box. When my grandmother-in-law, Nana Manya, as we'll call her, as we knew her, when she moved into the Montefiore nursing home, she gave this little box to my mother-in-law, and it's full of black and white photos. It's gorgeous little pictures, none of which are dated, marked, or have anything on them. They're just random. And she said, here, you might like to keep these. And my mother-in-law dutifully said, you're the journalist, you're passionate about the family history, you have them. So I inherited this lovely little box, and I went through them all, and there's, you know, beautiful family pictures in there, none of whom we knew. We had no story attached to any of them. And I was genuinely very interested in Nana's story anyway. I'd heard snippets of the story from my husband, her grandson. I knew that this story was really something extraordinary, and that I wanted my family to be able, my children who are here this evening, to be able to know this part of their life. And this part, it's so important that they understand who they are and where they came from. And I wanted them to know the journey that Nan and Pop took to get to Australia, and what brought them here and brought us here, and really created them as a family. So that was really where my interest in it began. And there was no intention of writing a book to begin with. It was really just to write down Nana's story while she was still alive, and we were still able to sort of take that story down, so that we had that story for the rest of our lives and for the wider family. And of course, it very quickly became something far bigger than even I could ever possibly imagine it would become. And it's even now, even after I've written the book, the story still continues to grow. There are more chapters that are popping up out of the woodwork, more people that are coming forward. So I feel like this was probably just the beginning of something really quite extraordinary in our lives. And it's been a great joy to be able to write this part so far.
So what did you know about your husband's family? What happened during the Holocaust? Did you know anything before this photo box? And
I knew a little of it. So I knew a sketchy sort of skeleton version of the story. I knew we had a vague idea of how they come to Australia. And my husband would tell me these wonderful stories that his grandparents would tell him as a child. My husband would go and stay over at his grandparents, and they would babysit them on the weekends, and Pop would tell the grandchildren these incredible stories, as, you know, bedtime fairy tale stories about how the wonderful clown fooled the Nazis by entertaining them and making them laugh while he could escape, and these sorts of incredible adventures that the family kind of almost palmed off as being, you know, these sort of crazy stories that Pop told. But they were true. And I had these pieces of this jigsaw puzzle that I wanted to put together. And I knew just in the snippets that I'd heard that Ralph had told me, and the things that my mother-in-law had told me, and just the little bits that we could get out of Nana every now and then, that this was not like any story I'd ever heard before. And as you mentioned in your introduction, I've covered a lot of things. I've written about a lot of big cases and lots of really quite unusual and interesting stories that have literally taken me right around the globe. But I had never heard anything quite like this incredible story that was literally sitting around our own kitchen table.
So then how did you get started? Like, what made you start the story?
I knew that we perhaps had limited time with Nana. She was as sharp as a tack and fantastic company, absolutely hilarious, wonderful, wonderful woman. But there's that little piece that sits in the back of your head that says, you know, she's getting older. Any day now, this story might go, and it goes with her. There's no one else here to tell it. So I started visiting her in the nursing home, literally taking in the box that she'd tried to palm off to everybody else. And we would sit together and I'd literally pull out all these photos and say to her, Nana, you know, I need you to tell me who's in this picture. Where is this? What's going on here? Oh, you know, get that. Ugh. Why do you want to know? So because it's really important to me, and it's important to Charlie and Alex that they understand the story. And I needed to capture her attention. So Nana was, even right up until her dying days, was an incredibly proud, very glamorous woman. She was always dressed to the nines. Didn't matter if you went in at 7 o'clock in the morning or 7 o'clock at night. Her eyebrows were drawn on, the lips were done, you know, the red pencil had done the lips. She had all of her jewelry on. She'd be wearing the most beautiful clothes. Her hair was done. She was extremely proud. And I, you know, started the first few times taking cakes in to see her, but she would say, don't bring me cakes. I'm trying to keep my figure. She was 94. I keep to keep my figure. So I needed to find another way to just kind of gently distract her and get her talking while at the same time not really thinking we were talking. So then I started to take in nail polish. She loved to paint her nails, and her nails were always fabulous. So I'd find the latest colour that I could get, and I would take that in and sit with my little box. And while she painted her nails, I'd put a picture in front of her and say, Nana, who's this? Oh, and then off she'd go. So it kind of worked out. This was our little secret thing. I've worked out the way that I can actually get her to talk without thinking that she's talking. And that was how we really sort of started to get going with the box. But then there was always a bit of anxiety within the family. You know, with these pictures, I really didn't delve too far. I was really just sort of skimming the surface with these. And most of the pictures in here, I mean, all of them, aside from one, are of happy times in Australia with friends and with family. I didn't know, and I didn't have any parts of the jigsaw puzzle for prior to that. That was something entirely different. And there was a bit of sort of discussion among the family of, well, we don't ask her because we're worried that it's going to re-traumatise her. So this one particular day, I had my little tape recorder out and we were sitting around the dining table at Montefiore, and there were all these other beautiful ladies sitting around there having lunch. And I pulled my little tape recorder out again and started asking her some questions. And she said, but why do you want to know all of this? And I said, Nana, your story is really important to us. It's really important to me as a family, for Charlie and Alex. And she pointed a finger around the table at every one of them and said, well, what about her and her and her and her? And in that moment, it dawned on me that she wasn't re-traumatized telling the story. She just didn't think that her story was anything particularly special, because everyone that she knew had endured some horrific trauma in getting to Australia. That was the essence of their lives. And she didn't want to be the one that, she didn't think her story was any more worthy than anybody else's in that room. So that was very much a light bulb moment for me. And it was really sort of the catalyst for me to be able to say, okay, she's okay talking about this. We're not re-traumatizing her. Now we really need to get to the bottom of this story. And that was really how it began. And I guess one of the things that really surprised me the most was that when I sort of gently prodded with the little snippets that I knew, and I really didn't know a great deal, certainly not what I know now, but the little snippets that I did know, she recalled in absolute clarity. It was like it was yesterday. And it amazed me that this whole life trauma had just sat under the skin, and I was barely scratching the surface of the skin, and she was able to recall things in great detail. And I know we're going to talk about Poland later, but when we went to Poland at the end of the research journey, which was 5 years later, once I'd pretty much done everything that I possibly could, we went back to Poland and retraced her footsteps. And one of the really gratifying things for me was that everything that she had told me, I was literally able to visualize and say, oh my gosh, that is exactly as Nana described that. So even at the age of 94, her memory of those events that were the most traumatic in her life was absolutely crystal clear.
And I know that you talked about Mondays with Mindla.
Yeah, it was sort of our running joke. We'd have Mondays with Mindla.
You know, Tuesdays with Murray's, that other famous book. This was Mondays with Mindla. And you slowly, as you know, with the bribes of that bright nail polish, you took.
She would have loved your nail polish, by the way. She would have thought that's very fancy indeed.
Oh, thank you. But what was it like spending time with her? And did you get to ask her all the questions that you needed to? And did your family find out things? Did your husband find out things that he didn't know?
Yes, he did. And I must admit, there were many points through the journey where I'd been researching and long after Nana had died, and I'd find out this one piece of information that I've been trying to find, and I'd go running into my husband and say, Ralph, guess what? I've just, got this email and found this. He'd say, oh, Nana told me about that. Oh, my God, really? Could you not have told me this 3 years ago? Thank you. But the time with her was wonderful, and she had such a great sense of humour, and she told and retold her story with such passion. So I knew from what she was saying to me and the things and the stories that she was telling me that I knew the way that she had lived them. And it was really lovely to be able to spend that time and sit down with her and just hear things in her own words and hear her telling the stories. And I tried to recapture her voice as much as possible in the book. I'm not sure whether I successfully did, because she did have she had a really wishy sense of humour, and she would talk about the Nazis and kind of laugh about it sometimes in the way of, we showed them, didn't we? This kind of attitude, which was wonderful. But she was very funny, very, very witty, and really very colourful in her descriptions and the storytelling. So that time with her was absolutely precious. But unfortunately, she passed away long before I was really thinking that this was going to be a book. It was still at that stage of family history project. So it kind of sat on my desk for a long time, but it just kept eating away at me, this file of things that I was progressively finding one thing after the next and after the next. And I think probably deep down, the more I was discovering, the more I was thinking this is really a story that's way beyond our family, way beyond our family history. And in hindsight now, knowing what I know now, I have probably 1,000 more questions I would like to ask her. And I just think if I could have just one more conversation with her, all of the things that I would really love to ask that I never got the chance because I just simply didn't know at the time.
So after she passed away, you went to Poland, in search of Mindla and Michael's story?
Yes, right at the very end. So after she passed away, and there was sort of a few years in between where it literally was sitting on my desk, sort of, calling out to me, and I was getting bits and pieces of information. And then I started to think, there really is something in this, and maybe this is a book. And I'd been, distracted by other book projects and other things that had to be written. And my agent said to me one day after I'd finished my book prior to this, what would you like to do now? And I said, I have to write this book. This story actually burns a hole in my heart. I need to write this story, even though I really only know the tiniest little bit of it. And I, as the words were coming out of my mouth, I could feel myself thinking, oh, I'm just asking for a major headache in my life here. This is going to be a nightmare. But it was probably one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done. But it was hard, really, really hard going. We went to Poland right at the very end after we'd done all of the research, so that we could then literally follow in their footsteps and their journey. And that was what we did. And even then, that in itself was a profound experience for us.
So tell us about that journey going to Poland. So I'm interested in what did you think about Poland? What extra research did you uncover in Poland? Christina, I don't know, some people might know Christina Duzniak, who used to teach at Melbourne University, helped you with some of your research. So what did you discover?
Christina was pivotal. I kept getting, along the way in the early sort of parts of the research, I was coming across a lot of hurdles because there was a lot of information that we just simply didn't have. And on some of the official records, the family and Nana and Pop are listed as deceased, which of course they're not. So I just sort of kept getting these barriers closed up in front of me. And of course I don't speak Polish. So Christina, I was put in touch through the museum, I was put in touch with Christina, who sources family histories, and her work was incredible. And almost immediately, she was able to tap into Poland, into the networks in Poland, and find a whole lot of family history for me that just, it was like a light bulb going off. It really put me in the catalyst then of being able to take the next steps and the next steps. So from her research, we knew a whole lot of things about where they lived and the family and all sorts of stuff that was really vital to me. So after I got through that particular stage and we had this full skeleton of this story, we went to Poland. And Poland was remarkable and very moving and very confronting at the same time for a whole lot of different reasons. From our perspective and a research perspective, and Ralph and I travelled there, and it was the first time Ralph had been to Poland, we were able to find, although we can't see the house anymore, but we were able to see the area where they lived. We were able to find where the circus building was. So we were able to piece together, and for me as a writer, I could piece together spatially where things were. But more than that, we were put in touch with the Polish National Circus Archive, who has they have all of the records, bits and pieces that have been donated. And we went out to visit them, this incredible building way out of, a couple of hours out of Warsaw. It's like a great big barn. And we've turned up, and this lovely man who only speaks Polish, by the way, doesn't speak a word of English, but he knew what I wanted, kind of pointed to these two boxes that he dragged out of the archive and was saying, I think what you're looking for might be in here. And so Ralph and I sat down on the floor, and we're literally pulling all these sort of things apart. And there in front of me was a picture of my son. Of course, it wasn't my son. It was Pop Horowitz. I almost passed out on the floor. It was one of those moments, so it took my breath away, looking at, oh my goodness, you know, there he is. And I was looking at my son's face right back at me. And we found in that particular box, circus memorabilia, circus reviews that had been written, souvenir programs. Somebody, we still have no idea who, but somebody had kept all of this material. A circus fan, maybe a circus performer, we'll never know, and had donated it to the museum. So that was absolutely wonderful for us, and I was able to get a whole lot of information out of that. And at some point, the Polish National Circus will look at doing an exhibition about the Circus Staniewski that Pop performed in and their work. The other point that was probably really pivotal was visiting Bialystok, where Nana was in jail. Nana gave me a description of what that jail was like at the time that she was there. She spent around about 9 months in the prison in Bialystok, which was then under Russian occupied territory. When we went back there, or when we went there to visit, the jail as she described it was exactly perfect. It was just incredible. It was like, for me, it was one of those moments, again, of just kind of taking your breath away, because this was exactly as she had described it to me, even down to the bars on the window looking down into the cell where she was. So it's still a functioning prison. It's actually the most notorious prison in Poland, apparently. High security, maximum security prison. So it's not a place that you can go in and wander around. But they were very kind. They let me sort of come into the main building, but we could see everything that we needed from the exterior. And there was a little plaque on the wall marking where those prisoners had been. So those sorts of things, which were totally unexpected, were really quite wonderful. The other really pivotal part of that trip to Poland was the Jewish Historical Institute, and being able to go there and find first-hand accounts from the Ringelblum archive of survivors and the survivor stories. And from the things that Nana had told me, I was then able to look at other first-hand accounts and piece together, fill in really the jigsaw puzzle of the bits and pieces that she told me. So that trip for us was really wonderful, pivotal. I would love to go back and can't wait to go back, because I still feel there's probably more we need to see there. And I'd love to take the children back there too and literally walk those footsteps again.
Yeah, and so I was thinking not everybody may have read the book. So
no.
Yes, so I just thought, yeah, so maybe we should tell them a little bit
Absolutely.
about Pop.
Yeah.
So will you tell them, like, what's the basic story?
So the basic story here is Pop Horowitz, or Kubush Horowitz as he was known, was a clown with the famous Circus Staniewski. So the Circus Staniewski was one of Europe's premier circuses leading into the war, a beautiful gala performance. They had this wonderful building in the middle of Warsaw, which was the place where the politicians, the glitterati, everybody went to be seen and to be among the hoi polloi, I guess. He was a performer with that circus. He met Mindla and they married, or Manya, and they married. And he went off touring around. The circus had a touring arm, so he was touring around Poland quite a bit. And he was touring Poland when war broke out, so they were separated. She was in Warsaw with their baby. He was in Bialystok at that particular time. And of course, in the interim, the divide went up and the territories were separated and they essentially became two separate countries. So he was in Russia, she was in Warsaw. She decided that as the ghetto, the news of the ghetto was coming out and this ghetto was going to be built and the Germans had fully taken control of Warsaw, that she was going to flee and be with him in Russia. He and the circus had decided they'd basically been kicked out of their territory and they were having to come back to Warsaw. The two of them passed on very, very different paths and never met. She arrived in Bialystok and he was gone. He came back to Warsaw and she was gone. So their journey was, I think if any of you have seen the movie Sliding Doors, it's their whole life for several years, they had these sliding door moments where they just weren't able to connect with one another. She was thrown into a Russian prison, into the prison in Bialystok, accused of being a spy, and her baby was taken from her and he was placed in an orphanage. And we found that orphanage when we went to Poland too. Miraculously, she was able to get a message to him via a sock. She'd knitted him red socks and she'd taken one of the red socks with her when she fled. And she was able to post the sock back to the family in Warsaw, not knowing whether he was alive or not, but hoping that her family was still there to let them know that she was still alive. And that arrived and he got that message and he then fled using the cover of the circus. He entertained the Germans and while they laughed, this whole troupe of circus performers essentially lived. And through that circus and through the cover of the circus, he was able to plot an escape from Warsaw and fled to Russia, where he found her and was reunited with her. And that was really where their journey began, because from there they went through Moscow, where he performed for Stalin in the Moscow circus. They went across the Middle East into Africa and Italy before eventually coming to Australia. So they certainly did. It was quite a journey, to say the least. And of course, they arrived here in March 1949, straight off the boat in St Kilda. And you can begin to imagine one of the first things that they see after this extraordinary journey is this enormous clown face on the side of St Kilda at Luna Park. I can't imagine what they must have been thinking. But they loved Australia. They settled here, they built a life here, and for the first time in their lives, they were able to put their head on a pillow at their house in Moorabbin and know that they would wake up the next morning, and they were very, very grateful.
Yeah, but the circus never left him, because
the circus never left him.
Who he became.
So it was like an itch that he couldn't scratch. They did lots of jobs to set themselves up. They worked in factories, they sewed buttons, they put shoulder pads in clothing, they drove taxis, they ran milk bars. But Pop always had the performer still in him, and he still continued to perform, whether it was for children's birthdays or all those sorts of things. And the opportunity came up for him to audition for a position on the Channel 9 Tarex show, which he did. And he got it. So he became one of the first clowns on Australian television as a performer on the Channel 9 Tarex show with the likes of Graham Kennedy, Bert Newton, Bert and Paddy. And we have some lovely vision of him performing with Paddy, in a very, very young Paddy McGrath, as she was back then. So he was able to continue his career. And I think that probably perhaps rounded off his life beautifully, that towards the end of his life, he was able to make people smile and laugh and make children laugh again in a totally different circumstances.
What was his clown name? It was...
Sloppo. He was Sloppo the Clown. And they were a duo, Sloppo and Boppo the Clown. And his partner, Norm Brown, who was Boppo the Clown, is actually still alive and was able to tell me some wonderful stories about about their adventures together and their performing together and what that time was like.
You know, it's so amazing. Like whenever I hear these stories, I just love all of those connections that, you know, Sue marries into this family, and look at this wonderful history that she's discovered and enriched your family's lives as well.
But of course, they didn't tell anyone, and he never told anyone. He never told his fellow performers his story. When they came to Australia on their arrival here, they made a promise to one another, and Nana told me this, that no good comes from looking back. So we don't look back, we just move forward. And that was it. The secrets were locked and kept, and that's the way they moved on with their life. And so these performers that he worked very closely with, none of them had any idea of what he'd endured.
So that I find fascinating. So was it hard writing a story about family? Did you make any unusual discoveries or any dark family secrets were they uncovered?
Yes, we did. And that was, yes, we did. That was actually probably the most difficult aspect of the book. The family were very supportive of the story being told, because for them, they wanted to be able to fill in the gaps of their life as well. So everybody was terrific. But we did find along the way, there were a few twists in the tale, and that was thankfully through Christina's help. We were able to find some family members that had survived. Nana passed away believing that she and one sister, Yaja, were the only two survivors of their family. They believed that everybody else had perished in the Holocaust. And we now know that that's actually not true. Two other brothers also survived. One went to America and one went to Israel. In the latter years, the brother who went to America moved back to Israel, and the two brothers lived around about 20 minutes away from one another. None of them ever knew that the others existed. All of them believed that they were the only survivors of their family. So that was the first sort of big shock of having to meet people on the other side of the world via Zoom as I was writing this, and having to knock on someone's door via email or by phone and say, I think we're related to you. And for one part of the family, that was very confronting, and they were initially like, well, no, that can't possibly be right because our family all perished. And so we provided all these documents that we were able to obtain through the International Tracing Service. So it's been lovely building that connection and knowing that those people are there. Additionally, on top of that, the other twist in the tale came that we found that Yaja, Nana's sister, had another family before she came to Australia too, and she'd lost her family, her children and her husband. They perished at Treblinka, but she'd survived. So there were very challenging family secrets. It's quite challenging to have to say to someone, I've got something to tell you, and I'm not sure how you're going to react. And it's actually quite emotional for some of them to be able to understandably have to deal with this information long after these people have passed away. So you can't go back to them and have that conversation with them. You've got this knowledge that wasn't there previously, and knowing that the others survived and Nana didn't know that they survived was pretty tricky.
Amazing. It's an amazing story. We'll have a chance for you to ask questions as well, so any questions. But Sue, would you write another Holocaust book? Like, yes. You sort of was, yes.
Yes, is the short answer. One of the things that has genuinely surprised me and delighted me through this and through the research of this has been the number of extraordinary stories that are still coming forward, people that are coming forward telling me their own family stories that, like us, they've just scratched the surface and kind of have a bit of an idea of things that have gone on. While I was in Poland, there were a couple of things that I researched while I was there that took me down different tangents as well that weren't necessarily related to this book, but stories that I thought, goodness me, that's never been told. That's a story that needs to be told too. So I'm certainly very interested obviously in the Holocaust. I genuinely believe that we are only beginning to hear so many of the stories that are still yet to be told. And I believe very passionately that every story should be told, every person should be acknowledged, and every voice should be heard. So it's not something that I'd rule out, and I'd probably rule it in at some point down the track.
Okay, so just moving on, when I met you in 2019, Sue was doing a research story for the Australian magazine on dark tourism and how tourists are obsessed with selfies, you know, in places like Chernobyl or in Auschwitz. So it's called Holidays in Hell. You can have a look at it from the Australian. But what motivated you to write something for the Weekend Australian magazine about these selfies? Like, what was the story there?
Well, the story there, I think what motivated me when we were in Poland, Ralph and I went to Auschwitz, of course. I mean, it's almost like a pilgrimage, really. We wanted to go and pay our respects and visit this incredible site and to really broaden our own understanding and our own learning about what had happened. And we were quite gobsmacked to see, you know, within minutes of arriving there, the selfie sticks coming out and people taking photos of themselves with it. Just we just couldn't get our heads around it at all. I found it really very confronting that you're in such a solemn and extraordinary place and people were there with their phones making sure that they had, even though they'd been told, please don't take photos, please keep your cameras away, this is not the place or the time, it was still happening. And, you know, uploading stuff onto YouTube while they're walking around. And I really wrestled with that for a long time. How can you come to a place like this and do that when I found that so disrespectful? And Sue and I had conversations about it, and I knew Sue's role, and it rang her, and we spoke about it. And Sue made the point, which I think was very pertinent at that time, that one way or another, getting people there to learn and to understand, no matter what pretense they might come on, is actually really important. And in saying that, one of the things that I really noticed was when we arrived on the train, and there was almost a kind of strange sense of perhaps anticipation or excitement about visiting Auschwitz, which I found a little odd. But then by the time we'd left, you were absolutely right in that obviously it had had a profound effect on people. So on the journey home, the bus that we were on was absolutely silent. And I think we could actually see the shift in people's faces. You could hear, you know, the quiet whispering of the dialogue. Suddenly, it was like the penny dropped and they got it and they understood. So that whole sequence of tourism now, there's a whole genre of tourism called dark tourism that's been sort of spawned out of places like Chernobyl, people visiting Chernobyl because they want to go and see these sort of places that to us are quite horrifying and bring no good memories at all. Some of the other Holocaust memorials in Germany, Auschwitz, all of these places are seeing this complete surge in visitor numbers of people going to visit these places. So it was a really interesting dichotomy for me to be able to really wrestle with, how does this work? And is this even okay? Can you, there were people, we were there on a very hot day and there were people sitting around on the grass having ice creams at Auschwitz when literally just over the mound there was a gas chamber behind them, and I sort of couldn't really cope with that at all. I found that way too confronting. But there is an argument that yes, as long as they're coming, then they're learning something, and perhaps that's actually the most important thing overall.
And then my last question before I hand over to you is, now I know you're researching a new book. I don't know if they're allowed to know, this is top secret information here. But the new book is a different story about World War II, about a group of 80 extraordinary women who are responsible for saving thousands of Australian lives. Now, can you just give some hints here about this new book and this new research?
I can give some hints. So this was a secret group of women. They were called the codename Monterey, and they were RANs. They were Navy women who were all recruited to form this special unit. Essentially, they had no idea what they were going into, but they were all very talented women, mathematically minded, and they were all recruited to form part of this unit. And until the day that they arrived, they had absolutely no idea what they were working on, but they were code breakers and they were brought in to decode Japanese code. They worked out of an apartment building just down in St Kilda, near Albert Park. And every morning they clocked in and they worked very closely with the Americans and with the team at Bletchley Park in the UK, decoding Japanese code. And they kept their secret. They swore on the Bible to the king at that time that they would never tell a soul what they were doing. And most of them kept the secret until their much later years. 10 years ago, David Cameron, the UK Prime Minister, sent them out. Each of the ladies that was alive received this beautiful little pin in the mail acknowledging their efforts. And it was at that point that many of them told their families for the first time what they'd done. They told them they were working as secretaries or working as assistants or whatever during the war, but they weren't. They were spies, they were code breakers, and their story is really, really wonderful. So it's been a delight to delve into that. And I've been able to spend some time with some of the ladies that are still alive. Some of them have now passed away in the process of doing this, but that's been really, really wonderful, really terrific bunch of very spirited women.
So is that going to be a book?
It will be a book, yes.
And maybe a TV series?
Who knows? Let's get the book done first.
But this is very new. Sue just told me about this a couple of weeks ago because it was all top secret.
It's been very top secret, and I'm already way past my deadline, and I've had to extend my deadline once already. So I have to keep my fingers crossed that my publisher will allow me to extend it a little bit further again.
How many ladies could you speak to?
I've spoken with 4 so far, 4 that we know that are living. And they all have quite different memories, but like Nana Munya, very vivid, bold recollections. And I think they've just been busting to tell someone their story. They've kept these secrets for so long. So it's a delight and quite a change of pace from the Freedom Circus.
And I like the way it's like an Australian story here.
It's a beautiful Australian story. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyone like to make a comment or observation or question?
Did they recover the child from the orphanage?
Yes, they did. Miraculously, they literally knocked on every door that they could find to find him. He was our Uncle Dennis, who unfortunately passed away just before the book came out. But he had been kept in it was a Russian orphanage. And he was a beautiful blonde-haired, blue-eyed child. And the lady who ran the orphanage was really not very willing to give him back. But she did, at the insistence of Pop. When we were in Poland, we literally followed their footsteps and went to each of the places. They were basically given a list of orphanages. But part of the deal of this, a part of the way that Nana got out of jail was a deal with the devil, really. Pop promised that if she was released to him, he would then go on and perform for the Moscow Circus. He was quite famous at that time, so this was quite a big deal. And he gave himself over to go and perform for Stalin. And that's what he did. And subsequently, she was released and the baby was found. But for a long time, at least the first year, he called her auntie. He called Nana auntie. And it took a long time before he would recognise her and call her mum. And I can imagine that would have been absolutely heartbreaking for her to have her child call her auntie for all that time.
Oh, my husband.
Fascinating story, and we'll moderate it. So.
Very good job.
I've actually, just one comment you mentioned about that. My mother actually also had to be adopted by an auntie in Moscow, and she was estranged from her mother, who was sent to Kazakhstan early in the war. So she was here for 5 years, so I can understand that estrangement. And they never quite fixed up their relationship thereafter. But what I wanted to ask you actually was that you sort of researched a story for a family that you've married into. You've got your in-laws and the wider family that grew out of that. What was the general feeling amongst the families that you put together and presented?
Delight, thankfully. I mean, I once I'd finished the first draft of the manuscript, I sent it around to all of the family first because I wanted them to be able to read it before anyone, and I wanted them to be conscious of it. And if any of them had said, I'm really uncomfortable about this, then we would have completely, it would never have been published. But for all of the family, it was finally the pieces were coming together of the jigsaw puzzle. Everybody knew bits and pieces. They'd all been told different things. They'd heard different stories. Suddenly, for the first time, it actually all made sense. And the things that they'd heard and all those little snippets that they'd packed away in their memories actually made sense to them. So it was lovely for me. It was a lovely validation for me to be able to do this for them. And it was lovely for me to know that it actually meant something really special to them too. And I think the general sense is that they're really proud now. And they're really proud to be able to say, Nan and Pop, actually, that's a pretty remarkable journey that they went on. And now we really understand. But all of us are in the same situation now that we really know the whole story, what we'd give to have one more conversation,
Actually, I was thinking, is there something you'd like to read? Is there a passage or something that, you know, for the people who don't know the book that is, because it's a really good book. And we're very fortunate. Sue's going to donate 5 copies to the Holocaust
Absolutely.
Centre. So you can come borrow from our library, or you can buy it.
I'll read for you. I can find this little chapter to give you some context. This is, I'll just read a couple of these pages, but this is the 1st of September in 1939 in Warsaw. And Mindla has literally just woken up. Her husband is away touring in Bialystok and she is at home with her family where she lived and her baby. The sky is just beginning to turn pink when the noise wakes Mindla. It's a familiar rumble, almost rhythmic, metal scraping on metal, followed by a soft thud every now and then off in the distance. As the pattern repeats, it doesn't take long to settle in Mindla's mind. Definitely aeroplanes. She prays it is a Polish Air Force still practicing their dogfights and drills. Slivers of sunlight creep through the cracks in the paper-thin blinds. Gad is fast asleep behind her, oblivious to the din outside. She cuddles the toddler in close and gently strokes his forehead as she lies in bed listening to the strange noise. She notices the absence of the pigeons that nest on the window box outside her room, usually cooing among themselves at this time of the morning. The thunder rolls in louder and louder and louder. She pulls back the corner of the blind. Oh, good God, she gasps. The dawn horizon is dotted with silver birds, their bellies bursting with bombs. A long whining scream is followed by the impact and then an explosion. She scoops up the sleeping child and runs into the kitchen. Mindla's brother and sisters jostle for position at the windows watching the horrific sky show. Hitler's Luftwaffe, flying in perfect formation, line the skies as far as their eyes can see. The family hear the screeching noise again, followed by a haunting whistle and then the thud of impact. Get down, Schmiel yells as they each dive under the kitchen table or their beds, cowering. A few seconds later, before they have time to catch their breath, the same noise, a high-pitched hiss followed by the thump of a bomb smashing into the earth somewhere nearby. Their building judders. For a few moments, there is silence. Then the wailing of an air raid siren sparks a frenzied rush. A human stampede is heard outside the apartment door as neighbours, panic-stricken and shrieking, push and shove their way down the narrow wooden stairs to the cellar. Schmiel is yelling too. Run, we must run, he cries. But instead of running, they all freeze, momentarily unable to process what's going on. Another air raid siren snaps them back into the terrifying reality that Warsaw is under attack. Attention, attention, a loudspeaker screams. It comes. There is no time to run. Mindla snatches a blanket and throws it under the bed, pushing Gad as far into the corner as she can. She crawls in beside him and does her best to shield him with her body from whatever's about to happen. Sonia does the same with little Shara under the next bed. The little girl puts her fingers in her ears when the bomb's piercing whistle fills the room. In every available spot, someone shelters, under the kitchen table, in the closet, under beds, while bomb after bomb rains down on the city. Blitzkrieg has been unleashed. And that was just day one of the war.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, Lauren.
You could talk to her again. What would you ask?
Oh, there's so many questions. I'd love to ask her more about what she was like as a teenager. I've got a pretty good idea of how spirited she was. And the fact that she wasn't supposed to marry a clown. She was supposed to be married. Her father would have chosen her husband. And this fellow came into her life, and that was quite a surprise. And for quite some time, her sisters secretly arranged for her to get out of the house and go and meet with him and court with him because her marriage would have been arranged. So I would love to ask her more about those times and what that was like in the relationship with her sisters and her mother. Oh, you know, everything really. I would really love to be able to sit and ask her everything again, the learning. At every point in the journey while I was trying to put this book together, I just kept thinking, oh, if only I could just pick up the phone and ask her what happened here or what happened there. That would have been you know, truly, truly fantastic, but I wasn't able to do that. And in hindsight now, I'd love to just be able to have that conversation at an older age, looking back. What did she learn, and what does she reflect, and what does she think about it all now in hindsight? And what does she worry about the future for us? Lots of strange things happening in the world at the moment, and some of it not too remote. So there are a million things that I'd love to sit down and have that cup of coffee with her and ask her all those things again.
Pop was not just in the Russian circus. Tell them, because it was an amazing story. He was in the famous Moscow circus.
He was in the famous Moscow circus, the Moscow circus, which performed for Stalin. And they were used as propaganda. They were certainly used as propaganda to entertain the Russian people. They became their role was actually quite important to lift up the spirits of the Russian people, even when the German troops were on their doorstep and about to flood them. It was the circus that went out and entertained people and took the mickey out of the Nazis, and they mimicked Hitler, and they did all of these sorts of things and played this role of a complete propaganda role to keep everybody's spirits uplifted and make the population think that Stalin had all of this under control. And so their role was actually quite pivotal. But when they arrived in Moscow, he was feted. He was treated like a celebrity. They were given the best of hotels. They were given all this food that they'd never had. Mindla was eating horse flesh. You know, they were carving horse flesh from dead horses on the street in Warsaw to survive. And she'd just come from a Russian prison. Arriving in Moscow, they had a beautiful hotel to stay in. They had all this wonderful food and warmth and clothing. They were given all of this clothing. The contrast in that life and how that must have been for her is really something else.
You managed to uncover any archival footage?
A little. We're still actually trying to search for some more. We know it's there, but we just don't know who's got it. But we weren't able to get any archival footage from Warsaw, unfortunately. I would have loved that. We were able to get we've got a little bit of footage of him performing on the Tarex show, only a little bit, but the photos, we found photos of him performing and photos of him in his costumes. And one of the things that I did was with those photos that we were able to obtain, and we had photos of him from, around the mid-1930s when he was quite young, performing in various places. And I had those colorized by an amazing woman named Marina Amaral. Some of you might have know her work. She did a project called The Faces of Auschwitz, and she colorized all of the Auschwitz photos, and the images are just remarkable. But colorizing them gave them a contemporary feel, and it was like I was looking at them in real life. So I could see the color of his outfits and how he looked, the way he wore his makeup, the sort of circus. Yeah, those were black and white. And it really gave me in the research aspect of it, a totally different feel to the story, to be able to colorize them. So that was the closest that we've got to actual, we certainly haven't found any footage, but we certainly found some really beautiful photos in the Polish National Archive, and stunning photos of the circus, so many that I couldn't put them all in the book, but the circus itself was really wonderful, and the images of the circus and the performers and the animals was quite remarkable. Of course, all of that got lost when Warsaw was bombed. All of those animals died. All of that material and that colour and movement that went with that circus was completely lost. And some of you might know the story of the zookeeper's wife and the zoo animals and what happened in Warsaw then. Well, it was not dissimilar to what happened with the animals from the zoo, unfortunately, from the circus.
Yeah, Irene.
Look, not as far as I know. He was a very popular performer. Many of the performers in that troupe were Jews, and it was in fact the circus owners who helped orchestrate their escape. So their escape was really quite remarkable, and the two circus owners, who were Polish people, obviously fully aware of the situation and the danger that they were in, supported them and helped them by getting false papers and documents, and literally facilitated an escape for Pop and the other Jewish performers. So I think they're remarkable people. I have no doubt that on the street, he would have, of course, faced some anti-Semitism around that time in Warsaw, particularly. That was prevalent. And the places that they were going to when they were performing, there were some terrible things that were happening to Jews in some of those towns, which they would have known about and been very well aware of. But we're not aware of any direct anti-Semitism towards him. I would think logically it probably would have happened, but certainly not under his guise in the circus.
Oh, Jane's got a question.
Actually,
And then,
I'm asking a question on behalf of one of our people watching on Zoom, which is Tammy Resnick has a question. Hello, Tammy.
Hello, Tammy.
Re your craft in this context. It's for a writer. Tips on filling the gaps when you don't have someone to ask anymore. How do you shape characters and story arcs in this context?
That's interesting. Because this is a non-fiction book, and I have had people to say to me, that's a great novel. Like, it's not a novel. It would have been so much easier to sit and just pretty much make everything up as I was going along. I couldn't do that. In this case, and what I find useful, and particularly for a book like this, was going back and finding absolute first-hand accounts of everything, because other first-hand accounts and that other source material, particularly through places like the International Tracing Service and the Jewish Historical Institute in Warsaw, and people like Sue, who are absolutely wonderful. Everybody that I went to said, look, I think I can help you. Look here and look here and look here. So using other survivors' stories and other first-hand accounts, that really helped me to be able to fill in some gaps. And I sat with researchers when we were in Poland at the Jewish Historical Institute, and I was trying to work out, one of the big sort of pieces of the jigsaw puzzle I couldn't work out was how on earth she got from Warsaw to Bialystok. So they had first-hand accounts of the smugglers and the way that the smugglers took people, and the particular, right down to the detail of the routes that they took. So we were able to then sort of narrow down, this is the most likely route. She would have most likely gone on this route. And that was how I was able to sort of pull it all together.
So I think we're going to wrap it up at this point. But what I just wanted to say is, well, see, the alarm's gone off. Time to wrap up. Just wanted to say this story reminds us all, I guess, of how much luck was involved, as we know, in survival, and this whole sliding door. And even I was thinking the fact that her parents didn't want her to marry this guy, and had she not, gone on her own will and defied her parents, she would not have survived. But even still, the fact that she went to Bialystok and he went from Bialystok to Warsaw, like, it was so destined not to happen, and yet it happened and they survived, and it's just such an incredible story. So thank you, Sue, for writing the story and researching it and all the efforts that you've made. Although I know if our archivist is watching, she will not be in favour of your tin box storage. And in fact, we'll probably be calling you tomorrow about donating your items to our collection, because our archive store is just off here. I can give you a tour later and show you how you should be storing things. And thank you, Sue, for a wonderful job interviewing. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and our first event. It's been great to have you all. And let's just say farewell. So thank you to you guys.